For millennia, the Jewish people have celebrated the Passover seder, a biblically mandated meal that commemorates the emancipation of the ancient Israelites from Egyptian bondage.
Either leavened or unleavened bread.
The Passover meal has many unique symbols, songs, and rituals. The table is typically set with festive candles, a kiddush cup, wine, and matzah. On a special plate are symbolic foods that help illustrate the central event of the seder, the retelling of the Exodus from Egypt. The seder is typically celebrated with family and friends, music and dancing, and delectable cuisine. But the story of this holiday of hope begins thousands of years ago in the desolate bitterness of slavery. For more than 200 years, the Hebrew people endured the brutality of slavery in the land of Egypt. It was a dark time in Jewish history as their suffering was extreme. For generations, they were forced to build lavish cities and towering monuments to the Egyptian pharaohs. Mothers saw their newborns systematically round up and thrown into the Nile River as a way of controlling Hebrew population. The people cried to their God for freedom. Their pleas would not go unanswered. The waters of the Nile spared the life of one male Hebrew infant. Moses grew up in Pharaoh's courts, but soon left Egypt for Midian. While living the life of a simple shepherd, Moses was instructed by God to return to Egypt and demand that Pharaoh release the Hebrews from enslavement. Moses' request was ignored, and in response, God unleashed a series of 10 plagues that would devastate the Egyptians.
So we begin with the plague of dam, or blood. The rivers and all the waters in Egypt were turned into blood, making them undrinkable. And we know very well how important water is to all civilizations, but especially to a civilization like Egypt that finds itself in the midst of the desert and is utterly dependent on the irrigation made available to them by the Nile. But it was really only the beginning. Subsequent plagues include Tzfardea, the frogs that came from the rivers, kinim, or lice, disease in the cattle, plagues of boils, the plague of barad, or hail, arbe, or locusts, and then came the 9th plague, darkness, which, as many scholars have pointed out, shows God's complete power over even the sun, which was thought to be associated by the Egyptians with their supreme deity, Amen-Ra. But even that 9th plague was not enough.
9 plagues ravaged the land of Egypt, yet Pharaoh was not moved to grant Jewish freedom. Egypt was to be visited by a 10th and final plague, the death of the firstborn in all the land. To protect themselves, each Hebrew family was to choose a year-old unblemished lamb and slaughter it. Then they were to take some of its blood and mark their doorposts so that the angel of death would pass over their house and their children would be spared.
As devastating as the first 9 plagues were, the 10th plague was a complete catastrophe for Egypt. In every household, the Bible tells us, there was at least one firstborn who did not escape his or her death.
And it is precisely the events of this final tragic plague that gives the holiday its name.
The name Passover, or Pesach, is thought to refer to the story of the 10th plague in Egypt, when God commanded the Israelites to cover the doorposts of their homes with the blood of the sacrificial lamb to indicate to the angel of death to pass over their households while the angel passed through and killed all of the firstborn of the Egyptians. The word Pesach, or Pasach, to pass over, gives us the name Passover. And with that plague, Pharaoh had nothing else to do with the Israelites and insisted that they leave immediately.
The Egyptians likewise urged the people on to hasten their departure from the land. They thought that otherwise they would all die. The people, therefore, took their dough before it was leavened in their kneading bowls, wrapped in their cloaks on their shoulders. Exodus 12:33.
The Israelites had to leave in such haste that they were unable to prepare the food for the journey. the flour and water that they had combined to prepare dough for bread didn't have the opportunity to rise, and that is the origin of the unleavened bread, or the matzot, that is traditionally eaten on the holiday of Passover.
During the Passover Seder, the story of the Hebrew people from the oppression of slavery to the exuberance of freedom is memorialized. For thousands of years, the story of the Exodus from Egypt has been told and retold during the course of the ritual meal. And it is precisely a Passover Seder that most scholars believe Jesus celebrated with his apostles in the upper room in Jerusalem. Although the term does not appear in Scripture, this farewell meal has come to be known as the Last Supper.